Welcome to Beyond the Prompt. This is where I go live with creatives who are doing some seriously bleeding edge stuff with AI. And I'm not just talking about those who hype the tools and say, hey, this is what's possible, but people who are actually doing real creative work that ships. Hi, I'm Sana. I run Imaginoo. We are an AI-enhanced creative studio that produces product visuals and scroll-stopping content for fragrance, beauty, and wellness brands. And on weekends, I like to make animated children's stories, so my Photoshop sees a lot of action, which is why I was blown away to see what Rob was doing. I'm someone who spends way too many hours reworking AI-generated images. What he pulled off made me stop and think, okay, this is next level. So, quick intro. Rob DeWinter is a creative trainer, an Adobe Mac speaker, and the author of multiple Photoshop books. But beyond the credentials, what stood out to me is he actually got Photoshop to listen to him just by chatting. Rob, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. First of all, I like experimenting. And nowadays with AI, you can build your own plugins. I'm not really a programmer myself. I know how to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So I have a little bit of background for that. So I know the technical side. But with AI, I use Cloud, by the way, for coding. The world opens because you can just write your own plugins. It might not be perfect. Sometimes there are mistakes that you can't solve. But it's really great to be able to just make concepts. And this was one of the things that I made. So I used Cloud to write a plugin for me that uses Flux Kontext, and we'll show you Flux Kontext. Kontext is one of the models made by Black Forest Labs, and that's a new model. It's only 1.5 months old, or something like that. It's all completely built on context. So if you have an image like this, you can say, okay, just by telling this image, remove the thing from her face, it makes an image based on that main image. Then she's now taking a selfie in the streets of Freiburg, and now it's also snowing there. Really context based, and it keeps the identity of the person that you're building something on. So you can even just throw in an image and then write a prompt. But what I miss here is that you can make selections and that you can use your Photoshop tools as you used to use. I try to build a plugin that calls Flux Kontext, and then that you can use it inside Photoshop next to Firefly. To do this, I just asked Cloud to write me a plugin. It sounds easier than it is, by the way. It takes you quite some time before it works. What I ask is, how can I do this? And then it advised me to running on replicate.com. Replicate is a website where you can find all kinds of generative models. The API codes are there also. And you can use these codes to call the API on Replicate. And when you have some money on this website, you can just run all the models. And this model costs 4 cents per output image. So that's not so much. Actually, the outputs are quite good, actually. And every time when I run the script in Photoshop, it will call this API and then bring back the image back to Photoshop. I will first show you how it works. I made a script, and all the scripts in Photoshop you can run by going to File, Scripts, and then here's my own script. So you can browse scripts and load your own scripts. But when you place it in a certain Photoshop folder on your computer, you can also attach a shortcut to it. So I made the shortcut Shift-Command-K to run this script. And when you run the script, you will get a pop-up and that will say, we can run the model Flux Kontext Pro. You can add a prompt. You can say, I want to upscale it. That's also one of the things that's done on Replicate. I attached another model that upscales the result because it's quite low resolution.
What's that model for you have for upscaling? Because I'm always looking for new and better upscaling.
So is this model Nightmare AI and then Real ESR again. It works quite well, and it was also cheap, so that was also why I used it. I just wanted to have a upscale. There's also a new one in Photoshop itself, by the way. It's in Photoshop Beta, just released, and that's also a very good upscaling model. So I might be running that model in the future. But so when you add a prompt like this, you can say, okay, run this prompt, click generate. Now it goes to replicate.com, and so it will return an image to Photoshop, and then it will bring it back to the original file. Now, it's one of the first times that it didn't bring back a good result, but usually it just says old. It's now a little different than what I wanted to make, but still it uses the same style and it will write down the right word most of the times. But now, of course, you will always see when you do this something like this live that it will return something bad. But still, it's very impressive how it keeps the style of new. And I also selected a little bit more in this case, because then it also has the context of York. York also already has an O in it. So when you also select this with it, it will also use the same O, but I will show you another example. Maybe you want to turn his face towards the camera. When you make a selection around this guy, I'm just going to run my shortcut, Command-Shift-K, and then I will say, turn his head towards the camera and do not change anything else, because otherwise it might also change the background. I'm running Flux Kontext Pro. If you do more with text and typography, you can also use Flux Kontext Max, but that's a bit more expensive because it's a bigger model. And I'm not going to upscale it. Just click Generate and then see what happens. And what I find funny is that it will add a new layer to your Photoshop file with a layer mask. This is the layers panel with the layer mask. You can see some differences here in this area, but that's always happening. Of course, it needs to move the body a little bit. So when you select the layer mask and then say, I want to use my brush to paint away the areas that I don't like, or you can just use a black brush and then, well, I use layer masks the way you're used to. But it's very helpful because you can just move around and you can say, I want to move this image a little bit towards that area.
Yeah, this was one of my favorite examples of yours because at a side view, you don't actually have that much information about what's happening here. So it just made its own assessment of what it would be for front facing, and it looks pretty decent.
Yeah, it's amazing. The coloring is still very good. And these are things that are not able with Firefly nowadays, and actually with almost none of the models. If you do this with ChatGPT or with other models, it will always change the face and the expression or the coloring. There's no model keeps the identity of the person. What I also found very funny is that you can make a new selection and say, paint his face like a clown, and then upscale the result, and then click Generate again. It will use this area, and that's also one of the pros when using these kinds of things in Photoshop. If you just return a whole image, that also goes pretty quick. If you do this in Flux Kontext website and then upload an image and then say change this face to a clown, that will also work, but it will return this whole area. And because the resolution goes down every time you do this, the image will get worse and worse the quality. This is much better way because you only return this part of the image and not the whole image. One of my problems when building this plugin, sometimes the results returned moved a little bit upwards. So sometimes you have to move the result a little bit down to make it match again. So I have to fix that.
Which also happens when you use Flux and follow AI and something, and then you can't shift it. And the resolution thing, I actually did an animated children's story, which I just wrapped up, and I was using Flux for it's an animate, really fast moving French bullet train, and it gave great images as still images, but it would move it a bit. And so since I was using this for video, frame by frame, there'd be this drop in resolution. It didn't feel as good. I'm like, why isn't this feeling good? Should I like invest in Topaz and upscale the whole thing? But now it makes sense given how you're talking about Flux. It was moving things a bit, resolution was dropping. And so even though what I started with as a first image was really sharp and on point, as the video progresses, you start noticing a massive difference in Dash the Bullet Train's brightness.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the biggest downsides I also encountered, because every time when you generate something new, the resolution will go down and down, and it will downgrade your image. Actually, it's just a new model. Maybe they will make it better and better. And what I also missed is that you can't use an input image yet. I read that they were working on input images so that you can also use a reference image or a product image. So that will be very helpful. And this was also one of my favorites. I think this is magic. I select this woman and then add the prompt, extract only the shirt over a white background. So I want to extract her shirt and then make a product photography style image. I use the upscaling here and then also output to new document, because that's very helpful in these kinds of situations. And when you click generate, it will extract her shirt and then output it to a new document. This will take slightly longer because we are also upscaling the result.
Oh, wonderful. Wow, look at that.
It's amazing. The only thing it doesn't do that well is that it didn't recognize how long their sleeves are, but it's still impressive that you can do something like that. You can also say make a selection around the bird and say make a close-up of the bird. If the bird is far away, it will make a close-up. Or I have a certain style of a vase, and you select the vase and then you say make a plate out of this with the same style. So it's really impressive that it keeps the identity of the things that you want to use. I also wanted to show something of the differences between the regular generative fill in Photoshop compared to this, because I think you can't really say that one is bad and one is good. Different use cases.
What is generative fill from Photoshop good for, and what is the Flux model good for? What situations would you
Um,
use what in?
Flux can also be good in extending images, but I think Firefly is so well built in Photoshop. If you make your image larger with the crop tool and then say generative expand and then click generate, this is really something that where Photoshop excels in how good it is. It's also fast. You can upscale the resolution right within Photoshop, and then it's also context aware because it uses the same context. You will get three variations. Also, the quality is really good. What I also like is that it is very aware of the surroundings. So when you say something like, okay, make a selection in this area, painting selection in the mountains, and then say reflective water, and when you say generate, it will make very good reflections of the mountains in the water. And that's also something that where Firefly is really good at. So it keeps aware of it is aware of the environment of the image and the rest of the image, but it will create something completely different, something like this or this. Yeah, I think this is still magic. So this is, but if you have something like this, like the man in the image, like this one, this is not possible with Firefly because it just creates an entirely new face and it isn't aware of the original image. It's just different models. And also what Firefly is really good at is blending images, like blending layers inside each other. So if I have something like this, I can make a selection around this area and then just say nothing to generative fill. So I click generative fill and then click generate. And then because there is a selection on top of both of the images, it will make a blend between the two layers. I use this a lot when I make compositions and say, okay, I have one layer on top of another layer, then make a selection around the bottom and two objects. And and you have three variations again, of course. And I think this is, yeah, sometimes it adds something strange like this, but you can simply remove that with the remove tool. Yeah. So I think, yeah, having the best of both worlds would be the best option, I think. And ideally, I would say that it might be best that Photoshop chooses the right model when you say, okay, I'll turn his face towards the camera, that it picks something like Flux. And when you do something like this, that it uses Firefly or something like that, that you don't have to bother people with choosing the right model for the right choice.
I've used generative fill for everything from shadows to removing earrings to removing tattoos to making someone
Yeah,
smile to so
yeah,
it's been amazing. And so seeing this
yeah.
is just next level. So that's awesome. Great. What is maybe a tip or a takeaway that you would give to creatives who are working with Flux and with generative fill?
And my key takeaway is that people just should play around. I know that a lot of people feel a little bit intimidated. A lot of people think I will be replaced by AI. But I think that when creatives play with AI tools like Flux, they create way more beautiful things than people who are not creatives, who are not educated in it. I think they don't have to be afraid to be replaced, but once you start playing with it, you will see that sometimes it can also be very helpful to play with it. Just try it out and don't feel intimidated. Just choose something that feels comfortable, and then you can learn a little bit more every time that you use the tools. I think that's my biggest key away for creatives.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Rob.
Yeah,
Really appreciate
thank
you
you
taking
too.
the time here and showing us your workflow. And yeah, we look forward to seeing what else you come up with as you play around with these tools. Thanks,
Thank you.
Rob. Take care. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye.